hbusinessolutions.co.uk. Oh no, what have I done?
Ready.
Right, where's my thing gone? There you go. You can see
Nothing yet.
Can you see it now?
Not yet. Oh yeah.
Okay, so I'm going to let everybody in now. Hello, everybody. Hello.
Hello.
Welcome. If you would like to put your name, we're using the chat within Zoom. So if you want to just say hi and just put there what your biggest people challenge is currently. Say hi, where are you from? We'll just let people join.
Oh, some good challenges coming in already.
Good.
Oh, redundancies, yeah.
So anybody who's just joined, hello and welcome to this people session. And if you want to say hi and just say where you're from and what your biggest challenge is currently, that would be great. And we will go through and obviously answer any questions a bit later.
This is really good to see, actually, because it's going to help us with what we talk about.
Yes. Brilliant. Super. Great. Got a couple people from Home Instead. Hello. Hi, Claire. Hi, Nicola. Right. So if you want to start. I've not got anybody waiting in the waiting room, Helen, so if you want me to bring up your slides, then I'm happy to.
Yeah, that'll be great. Thanks, Sue. Okay, so my name is Helen Butler and I own H&SC Business Solutions, which is a one-stop shop for the health and social care, covering human resources, CQC compliance, quality, training, payroll. So this is HR fundamentals as we stand in order to make sure that employees and employers are the right fit for the business, but also for the employers like yourselves to understand what HR fundamentals are. And I think from my background of being in the health and social care for 24 years, it has certainly changed. And I think that over the last probably 6 months with COVID, it's been a really challenging time with lots of different questions that we've been brought to our attention, where a lot of smaller organisations and care companies and health and social care across the board necessarily realising that their HR fundamentals has probably been the stumbling block. So what we've done is we've put together a number of slides to go through, and we'll take it from there. Is that okay? And would you believe it, that's my house phone that's rung. It never rings. So what I'm going to do is, that will stop in a minute, I'm really sorry. Should stop. 2 more. Yeah, sorry, I'm really sorry about that. You won't put money on that, never rings. Okay, so the first slide we've got, Sue, if you could, is why people management matters. So just to give you a little bit of a tip, I actually stutter. So as I go through this, there may be times where I will struggle to get my words out. So please bear with me if that's okay with everybody. So why does it matter? Well, people are your biggest assets. And without the people, we don't have a business, full stop. So as I've said, people are your greatest asset in terms of financial and reputation. And I think one of the biggest single costs to your business is likely to be your payroll. Because obviously the cost of your pay roll cycle is really important to make sure that you pay people correctly and at the right time. And make sure your staff team are faced for your business requirements. So in matter of fact, it's people are our greatest assets in every business, and good HR management will help you with levying the best people from the assets, as well as save you time and money if things go wrong. I think as well, in relation to people matters, it's about making sure that they have the right values and how you get the right values to your business. And I know Sue Jones is going to discuss that during her slides, as well as Sophia's. But having the values through your recruitment process always matters with engagement. Making sure that your engagement with the people from the word go is so important. One of the tips that I always give to people with recruiting is making sure that they communicate as soon as they get their application landing in their inbox or on their desk or a telephone. Picking the phone up will make them realise you care, and that's as part of your values to start off with. Okay, the basic principles. If you could, Sue, to the next slide. The basic principles is really to make sure that you hire the right people. The people, like I said, are your biggest assets. And actually, you can mould people. If they've got the right values, you'll be able to mould them. One of the questions that we get asked a lot, especially in relation to CQC, is actually they want to see an application form, or and you have to have it. But you have to also remember that some people are not always able to fill out an application form. So you need to think about how you can get people to fill it out. One of the things that we have done in a number of our services that we support is actually the first port of call is a telephone call. They'll send in, I'm interested, they pick the phone up and they have a conversation. Then you'll know if they're the right fit as well to start off with, because communication verbal as well as written is really important for the health and social care, because sometimes, in many cases, depending upon what kind of health and social care industry we're in, that carer may be the only person that they see all day. So make sure everybody knows what they should be doing. And why is that important? Because it's your business and you need to make sure that the basic principles and values are set out from word go. Having clear policies and procedures in place for all aspects of your business, including staff and client facing, because the clients have to understand what the staff are doing and the staff need to understand what the client's requirements are. And it's really important to have these basic principles in place. These aren't rocket science principles, but these are key principles to make sure that you are well led and responsive and effective, and all of the others that comes along with the kilos. Positive framework for performance is really important. Motivation and recognition, nipping the issues in the bud, and personal development. We all have issues with motivation and recognition. We all have issues with nipping things in the bud, and people necessarily want to develop but have struggling times. All of this is for your business CQC, and as well as Ofsted, because we look at the Ofsted side of it as well. Whilst having clear policies and procedures in place, they are very, very lengthy. One of the things that we suggest, and which works really well, is a 2-page profile. So if you've got a policy and a procedure that is 20-30 pages long, they're only going to take a snippet of it, a snapshot. A 2-page profile condenses it and has the key points into it. That also goes down well for staff, because if you're in any supervisionary meetings and you've got to discuss a policy and a procedure, again, that is a good stead of how it works and what they understand. Nipping issues in the bud is really important, because 2 things. If we don't nip issues in the bud, it can get bigger and bigger and bigger, where people might not want to come to work, which then is motivation, which then causes bigger issues for the whole staff team. Whilst conflict isn't always good, we have to deal with conflict, and as a HR, we are there to support you in how to do it, because at the end of the day, a lot of this is your time is taken up, HR issues is taking up a lot of people's times, management times, and actually you have to get it right, because the consequences, I've just had somebody, so can you hear me okay? It's just somebody just said about the sound. Brilliant. So I just think that we need to make sure that as you as business owners or managers actually understand the basic principles of why HR matters and why hiring the right people from the word go is really important. Because as I said, these are just very basic principles which are all to ensure that your businesses are compliant with CQC and Ofsted and making sure you run smoothly as possible. Sue Jones, are you going to talk about hiring the right, or is that later? I can't
Say it again. Sorry.
I've just got, are you going to talk about hiring the right people later and about how that fits into your part of the process?
Yes.
Fantastic. Okay. We talk about, so next slide please, we talk about making sure everyone knows what they should be doing and why. A good introduction is a continuation of your recruitment process about the right people and the right principles, about that communication. If staff are inducted correctly, then it goes a long way, because you will be recognised for making sure that they've had the appropriate training to get out on the field, the appropriate policies and procedures sign off, and also to meet staff Meeting individuals is really important, and understanding what their roles and responsibilities are within an organisation, and that should all be done within an induction. What makes a good induction? Clear communication. One of the things with HR is communication. However, it's a big thing that lacks. Lacking of communication can actually end up having businesses in trouble because, again, they don't know what their job role is and they don't know why they're doing it. So why am I employed? What is my job description? Who do I report to, and why am I doing it? You're doing it because it's the job you're coming to. I know that I report to the team leader. My job role is a care assistant. You very clearly defined it out, and that starts a good employee and an employer relationship. And it goes back to the conversations, like I said at the beginning, is actually communication. Many care businesses have high turnover in the first 12 months. And this often can be a contributor to the quality of the induction. Why? Again, time is of an essence. You have to induct to ensure that you invest. You induct correctly, you will invest in your team and they'll stay. You induct not correctly or not as you want to, and then don't feel valued and they don't understand the values in your business, that can then lead to high retention and they leave within the first 12 months. But on the other side of it, it has a massive negative impact on the morale of the team and also your clients, your customers, the people that you support. We all use different terminology. And therefore, it has a negative impact because a carer gets used to that person or a core team, and then one disappears or two disappears or the whole team goes, then it's not continuity for the business and it's not continuity for the business and the clients. So morale and there's a few key things which is very quick for morale. A thank you, a good well done. If they're doing something good, give them a pat on the back or just say, thanks very much, you've done really good today. But also, if it's not what to your expectation, then use the sandwich. Good, positive, negative. Negative, positive. Because it ends up being it's called a sandwich, but actually they go away thinking of the positive because you've sandwiched that middle of the negative. We all know that regular supervisions is really, really difficult. With team meetings, it's really difficult to do at times, and that is across the board. However, it's a requirement of CQC. It has to have a proper agenda, and it has to be a two-way communication. And these are all key fundamentals of having a successful team and a successful business. It's all linked to performance. Some people do it pay related, a lot of people don't. But actually, it's about having that two-way. But it's also then talking about absenteeism, what's worrying them, what could the home improve, what could the home care service improve, what could the day centre improve. And it also gives them the opportunity to reflect on what the time has been in the past 3 months, 6 months, depending upon how often you have your supervision. So and it all comes down to communication. And I think one of the things that I would say in all of this is encouragement starts from the induction. Have your induction right and it goes through. And also having your management team understanding that they are managers and they are responsible, and actually the management team should also have management meetings to ensure that the strategy and the vision and the values are continuously being provided to and communicated to the outside of the world, i.e. your staff, and also at times your clients. Okay, Here are some of the have clear policies and procedures in place. So next slide, please. Here are some of them. They're not all of them, because at the end of the day, you can have hundreds of policies and procedures. These are some of the key ones that has to have in any handbook and in a governance with ACAS. Disciplinary, grievance, ill health, capability, performance management. They're your key ones that you need to have, but there's a lot more. There's a lot more, because you've also then got your redundancy, your whistleblowing, your bullying harassment, and you have to make sure that staff understand that they have a responsibility as well as yourself, because the staff have responsibility to make sure they understand and that they know what they need to do and how they need to report things. Also, a staff handbook. You have to have a policy, you have to have a staff handbook. And as of the 1st of April 2020, there was a new legislation that came in regarding annual leave and contracts. So if you have a new employee now, they have to, on the first day of employment, have their contract of employment there. That you used to be able to have up to 8 weeks, but that came in as of the 1st of April. Also, annual leave, that's also changed as well. So you have to make sure that your policies are kept up to date. The annual leave is now an average of the last 12 months. Some people have done it the last 12 months from the 1st of April, but it should be the last 12 rolling months. So if you have a week off this week, your holiday pay is worked out your average earnings for the last 52 weeks of the year. So it's really clear that annual leave has to have some time to be looked into. But that then comes down to one of the first slides, is your payroll. Your payroll is a massive cost to the business and it has to be right. Sickness reporting. The amount of times I hear people say somebody's texting sick. Texting is not a way of reporting in. Again, it's the communication. If people are not following the policies and procedures, then they need to have a supervision. And if they have had supervisions and it's continuing and they're still not doing it correctly, then it takes it further down the disciplinary route. Sometimes the staff think they have the upper hand, and actually the employer has the upper hand, and we need to be mindful of that and reminding of it. And also, a lot of you're juggling all the time. And because you're juggling, we need to make sure you're doing it right. Next slide, so. Just some of the client-facing ones: safeguarding health and safety, medication and planning. Again, it's about two sides of the coin. Okay. Positive framework for performance management. I think some of it I've already spoken about. I've kind of gone ahead of thinking my slides. But again, start with regular supervisions. It's got to be recorded. I always say, when people come to me and my colleague Sue, who's on here as well, if it's not written down, it didn't happen. And if you take anything away from the fundamental HR is, please make sure that your documentation is recorded, because as a HR, we'll always say, have you got the documentation of that? No, I didn't write it down. It was a conversation. Even if it's a telephone conversation, you still write it down and you say further, and you send it to the employee and say, further to our telephone conversation, we discussed X, Y, and Z. Cover off key topics like safeguarding, key working, health and safety. Give a chance for them to feed back and try and coach them if they want coaching. Some places do annual performance management, and that is all of your supervisions at the end of the year brought into an annual appraisal. You maybe set objectives And also it's about your personal identity of development. If you want to develop, then you need to make sure that you have a personal development plan. So we're going to now go on to some of the challenges going forward over the next few months, which I think is going to be quite a challenge. So can I have the next slide, please? Okay, we all know COVID-19 has been here, and we know it's been a really, really difficult time. We could potentially be looking at another lockdown. We could be looking at restrictions being reimposed. We could be looking at responses to requests of flexible working and adapting. And we also need to ensure that training in health and safety and safer working is up to date. We've also got the furlough that finishes on the 31st of October and how that challenges could be. We've also got, with COVID, where it says restriction being reimposed, we've also got from the 1st of August, the restrictions for shielding people being lifted. Have you got your risk assessments in place for those people that are returning? Have you got your risk assessments for staffing updated for another lockdown? Are you starting now to see an increase in potential flexible working requests or time changes to shifts because of schools going back or the lack of wraparound childcare? How are you going to, as a business, make sure that whilst you are protecting the employee, you need to protect the employer? These are all the things that are starting to come up. And also we've got CQC monitoring coming into force as well. They're coming back as well, even though they've never gone away. We're going to see an increase of them being out there doing CQC mock inspections. We need to make sure that you are prepared for it. Also, 0 hours contracts. We're seeing a lot at the moment of businesses moving from 0 hours to contractual hours. Why? Because they're realising that 0 hours is not working for their business, because if staff are on a 0 hours contract and they've got continuous employment and they've got regular shifts, regular hours, they're actually classed as an employee. So it's gone of the days where 0 hours is becoming flavorable in light of a contract. The contracts are becoming more flavorable. And therefore, these are some of the challenges that we're seeing now at HNSC Business Solutions for going forward, and how we can help businesses adapt. So who are we? We're a HNSC consultancy providing care to the care businesses. We do HR and OD. We also do compliance. One of the things we are also looking at, we've had an increase in, is restructuring and redundancies, because obviously with the type of climate we're currently in, that is also happening in the care industry as well, with businesses unfortunately having to close. So we are supporting lots of different businesses at the moment with all sorts of HR and compliance issues, as well as CQC issues. So that is the fundamental of HR. I hope you've taken something away. If you haven't, the one thing that I would like to say is please make sure you document everything, because documentation going forward is going to be the real key, and also making sure you follow your policies and procedures, because staff will challenge you going forward. That's me done.
Thank you, Helen. Thanks for that, Helen. We've got some. Has anybody got any specific questions they want to ask Helen?
I've written some down actually, because I think I've responded, and then people have messaged me directly with a few questions. I was going to say, did you want to do them first?
Yeah, you read what you have.
Okay, so we've got a few on 0 hour contracts, Helen. First of all, the contract on the holiday period, is that relevant? does holiday apply to 0-hour contracts? And also, if you're trying to move staff away from 0-hour contracts and they refuse, is there anything that you can do about that?
Yeah, so there's a couple of things that you can do. So the first question about the holidays applies to everybody. That is a law. And basically how that I'll give you a little bit of background how it came to light. It actually came to light through a car salesman. And he wouldn't take any holidays because he was on the minimum wage. His salary was made up of commission and bonus for selling cars. So he was forced to take holiday, and because he was forced to take holiday, he lost a lot of money over a period of a year, or in his business world. So he took it to the Employment Tribunal Court and basically said it was unfair because it was regular income, and he won it. And there's been a lot of toing and froing, and it went to the appeal, and he won it still. And basically, anybody that is on regular hours, doesn't matter, receive regular income every month into their bank account, the holidays have to be not at a detriment. So if they're on a 30-hour-a-week contract and they average 40 hours every week, when they're on a holiday for a week, they should be paid 40 hours. So that's how it came about. And there's been a lot of toing and froing, which is the best way. And I've got a couple of businesses doing it very differently, but they are in line with legislation. We just have to make sure that you tell your employees how you're doing it. And I'm happy to discuss anybody afterwards, because it is the holidays is a complex one. It's not a easy thing to get your head around. Going back to the 0 hours, what I would be suggesting if staff don't want to move away from the 0 hours is actually they give you, so the employee gives the employer the availability that they're able to work, and if the employer can't accommodate it because they've got the hours already covered, then I'm afraid there's no hours to give. So the employee then becomes the person that's giving it every week, not the employer giving the hours to the employee. Okay.
Anything else, Sophie? Have you got any other questions?
Yeah, another question has come in from John, and they say that they've taken over a new business, and under the 2-pay rule, they have taken over old staff. Do they need to provide new employment contracts under their name, or do the old contracts stand for now?
The old contract stands. What I would be suggesting that John does is to seek, depending upon what kind of organisation it is, you would then also need to look at whether their terms and conditions that they are currently on from their 2P are more favourable to the current ones that they would. So if their 2P contract says you're getting £9 an hour and you offer £9.50, then I would be having that discussion through consultation to move them over to your current your new provider contract. It would be classed as continuous service, and it would also need to have a consultation. So I think it's each individual's case, but they don't have to offer a new contract because it's 2P and it's covered under 2P law.
I'm just chuckling to myself because I think I said 2Pay, did I? Which is something different to 2P. Fab. Would you like me to share my screen, Sue?
If you can, that would be great.
Okay, so here we go. So and obviously there will be more questions at the end, so obviously whilst we're going through all of this, I know I'm going to talk now for about 20 minutes, and then Sue will talk afterwards, and then we will have time for more questions. So if more questions pop up, please feel free to pop them in the chat box. But I'm going to talk to you now about well-being for about 20 minutes or less, and particularly staff well-being. Now, I noticed when people were filling in the challenges that they had within their business at the beginning, a lot of it fell back to staff retention. And so you might think, oh, well, I'm going to wait because this might not apply. But actually, a lot of what I'm going to talk about to do with staff well-being will affect how you retain your staff. So I think there's going to be some really useful things in here for you. And also, as well, I know that times can potentially be quite tough at the moment. Everything that I talk about is going to be no or low cost. So don't start thinking that I'm going to be suggesting yoga classes and, you know, pizza evenings and things like that. All that stuff's great, but I think we need to be practical and think about what actually makes a difference to staff well-being. So just to introduce myself, my name's Sophie. You may know me from a few different things. So I'm part of the Judgment Index team, and we support care companies with their recruitment, development of staff, and we run leadership academies as well and workshops. We wrote a book last year called The Care Leaders Handbook. Perhaps you've got a copy. And a lot of what I talk about is going to be taken from one of the chapters from the book that we wrote. And you also might potentially recognise my voice from the Road to Outstanding podcast, which I hosted 6 series, about 60 episodes, all interviews with people working in care, and a really good resource. We're still getting, you know, hundreds of downloads every month, and I think it's still relevant today. So I can talk a bit about where you can find that at the end, but that's who I am. So when we talk about staff well-being, I think one of the important things to think about now, obviously, well-being is a hot topic right now. You can't read the news or see anything to do with companies and employees without hearing about well-being. But I think it was always important in care, but it's quite often an afterthought, or perhaps doesn't come above the well-being of the residents or the clients. And I think there's a few things that you really do need to consider, what your staff turnover rate is right now. And I appreciate that now might be not like regular times, but think about what your staff turnover rate is. Think about what that costs you in terms of agency costs, in terms of absence, and think about the quality of the work that you're getting out of your staff as well. Is their well-being in the workplace or coming from their personal life actually impacting on the quality of their work? And what is that doing to the culture within the company? If you have a poor culture, the chances are that the workplace well-being is going to be poor as well. All of this is going to be costing you as a business. I know it's a lot more difficult to quantify than some of the other figures that you might have, but I think it's really important to start thinking of, okay, has well-being been a priority? Well-being of staff been a priority for me? And if it's not before, it probably is now, or it's probably something that you're starting to think about. So where do you even start when it comes to well-being? And I think that is the biggest thing that people find to be the challenge when it comes to thinking about well-being. What makes up well-being? What does workplace well-being even mean? And that is the thing that quite often people think of yoga, or I don't know, free drinks or something like that, some kind of happy hour. And I'm always really keen to try and look at well-being in a more holistic way. And actually, do you know what? You're probably already doing lots of things that can impact on staff well-being in a positive way. So what I like to do is take a look at a piece of research that was written by a company called A Great Place to Work. This is from a few years ago. And they looked at what drives well-being in the workplace. Now, you might look at this and think, oh, okay, yeah, we do a lot of this stuff. But what I'd like to do is break this down into a little bit more detail. Think about how you might now apply some of these things and how you might bring well-being more to the forefront of what you're doing and what you're thinking about doing within the company. And this can apply to care homes, domiciliary, whatever type of care business you are. I think that you can take some of the ideas that I'm going to share and kind of work them for you. So values aligned behaviour. I mean, values is such a key term when we're talking about care, but very often values is relating to the residents or the clients. So if you have a value of respect, generally that value is probably relating to some kind of respect that you have with the resident or the client. And I think the important thing to do is to think about, actually, how do our values relate to how we operate, the team, the staff? So if you have a value of respect, how can that now be turned into almost a statement or a sentence that reflects how the staff have respect for each other? What does it actually mean? And I think very often all of the values that you might have, and you're probably smiling away to yourself because I bet a lot of people on this call have the value of respect as one of their company values. But what you'll find is that care company values are often the same from company to company, you know, respect, integrity, caring. They're quite obvious and they're quite generic. And they might sit on your website or on the wall somewhere or in a staff handbook, but actually they're not really brought to life. And in particular, they're not brought to life in the way that the staff operate with each other. So if you have a value of respect, what does that cover? And I think the best way to understand this a bit more is to open it up to your team, get them together, have a little discussion about how you can make the values of the company be lived and breathed by the people that work there. And if you can do that and you can make them more than just words on a wall, and people start to actually see, oh, the values of the company are aligned with my own behaviour, and actually what's being expected of me is also the same that's being expected of everyone else, and we all believe that to be true and we all live it and we all agree with it, then you'll find that that will start to drive a much more positive culture that has actually been driven by the values as well. And so when it comes to values, I think one of the key things that's happening right now during this period of time is that people are finding that there may be some clash in their own personal values and then the values of the company. And this can be quite a bit of an issue in terms of, you know, if I'm being asked to go to work, but the correct PPE is not being provided for me, and so therefore that's against my values, then that creates this jar with you and the company, with the employee and the company. So I think it's really important that you get your messaging straight in terms of how the values are lived and how they're expressed and how they're owned by the people that are working for you. I hope that that's clear on that one. When it comes to teamwork, I think teamwork is something which happens a lot in the care environment. Obviously less so if you're domiciliary. You're going to have people out there by themselves right now who may be struggling and may not be feeling that they're part of a team, and you may even have people within your team where meetings aren't as easy, you know, there's Zoom overload, that kind of Zoom fatigue that's happening all the time. So how can you actually encourage teamwork right now? Because that is what people thrive from. You know, the people that work for you probably enjoy being part of a team. They enjoy caring, they care for others, and that's what's brought them into the care sector. So how can we now help them to work together a bit better? Now, I'm going to have a tip on this later on, because I'm just going to sort of plough through a few tips for you. But think about how you might be able to include people right now who might be feeling like they're not included. How can you do things such as maybe when you do have team meetings, have one person lead, and that can be a different person. Just to try and get that sort of motivation and encourage people to be bringing their qualities to the team. How can you start to look after people who might be out there on their own, who are struggling right now, and you don't know because you're not being able to see that person face to face? So anything that you can do to try and encourage, you know, and it might have to be social distancing coffee. It might have to be having a little set area that people can come to and sit outside and have a cup of coffee and get together and feel like they're still involved. But I think thinking about how you're promoting teamwork at the moment really will help to drive better well-being. Now, processes is an interesting one. We've talked about processes back in the very first of this series of webinars, and I think that would be something that would be useful to go back to. But what are the barriers in your processes right now? Obviously, lots of things might have changed. People might be struggling to catch up with, oh, what's required of me? What processes do I have to go through? What's important for you know, to get it right in terms of what's required of us right now to be compliant, and so where is the breakdown in that for you as a company? Where can you see that processes are starting to fall apart a little bit? or where they're overcomplicated. Like Helen said earlier, if you have a policy that's 25 pages long, you're just really not going to be able to get to the core of that. It's not going to be useful for people. So how can you start to streamline your processes to make it easier? Because if people have issues, if people are having to rewrite care plans over and over again, or write the same information in this place, that place, and that place, then that is causing unnecessary stress on people. And it might be something that you might just see as a bit annoying, but actually, how is that over time impacting on well-being? Could you be bringing in better equipment now so that people can be able to FaceTime relatives and things like that? Are these the sorts of things that you can look at to actually improve the overall well-being of your team? So something to think about there. And finally, recognition. I know that this is talked about a lot. We've mentioned it earlier, even on this call. But recognition is so often missed. You probably have members of your team that have stepped up massively during this time. They're probably feeling quite burnt out right now. They've probably run themselves ragged trying to do the right thing for the clients and for the residents. How are you recognizing that? And this doesn't have to be something that's going to cost you a lot of money. Can you have a board up somewhere in your reception area that is highlighting the staff that really, really deserve recognition? You know, a nice picture of them, some things that have been written by relatives or residents about what this member of staff has done. Is there something that could be shared on social media? One thing that we do find to be very common within care is that people can quite often come at things from a more negative perspective, and that can come with the territory, because you're quite often looking for what's wrong with this client, what is the risk, and it's almost frames people's minds into more of a negative way of thinking. So how can you switch this round and start to think, what's the positive that's happened? And that might be starting with the end of every day at a handover meeting, asking people to highlight one good thing that's happened today, or can you recognise somebody that's done something great today? And particularly having that come peer-to-peer, I'm going to talk about that in a second, can be really, really key for people. I think people just need a thank you right now with everything that they've been doing. So these 4 things are probably not alien to you. You're probably doing things that tick the boxes for all of these 4 pillars of well-being, as I like to put them. So what do you do now with this? And you're probably sat here thinking, yeah, we do that, or we do that a bit, but we could do it more. And actually, I've got an idea of how we can do more for this one. Nothing here is a brand new idea. But what can you do with it? And one thing that I would suggest is actually that you create a wellbeing policy, get it written down, 1 page, 2 pages maximum, and then promote it. So the people who were asking about the challenges they have in terms of retaining staff, sometimes just highlighting to your staff the things that you do as a company that do support them and do support their well-being, will have them sit there and think, oh yeah, actually, yeah, they do this for us, and they do that for us. So by getting it down on paper can actually make a real difference. Distribute it to your team, get their input on it. Decide the things which are your non-negotiables when it comes to well-being. Do you want staff to have their birthday off, or do you let them have a day off for free on their birthday? I know a lot of companies do this. Then make sure it's written down and it's part of your well-being policy. Have you got a space where staff can eat lunch with a bit of peace and quiet, that isn't in the middle of everything that's going on, and actually they don't end up getting a break? All things like this. So a few little ideas. There's going to be some more coming later. By having it written down, can just help staff to realise that you care about their well-being and that you value their well-being. But it's also something that you can start to make part of your recruitment process. You can start making people aware of it during their induction. You can start using it as a social media tool to attract new staff. And I guarantee you that this will be something that your competitor, maybe in the same town as you, is not doing. So really a lot to think about there, but nothing that is going to take you more than a couple of hours. And actually, I'll mention this at the end, but I do have a template wellbeing policy, which Sue is going to get out to everybody when she sends the recording out from today. So I've even done half the work for you. So what I want to do just in the last sort of 5 minutes or so, I'm going to share a couple of wellbeing strategies. I've touched on them already, but some things that you can go and do and take away and put into place to support staff wellbeing. Now, I've actually got more than this. I'm just going to run through 3 of them, but I'll tell you where you can get the rest of them. So I mentioned this a second ago, but creating a space for staff to actually relax on their breaks. This is something that any person working in an office would just expect automatically, but I see it happen so rarely in care. In fact, the place where I see staff being able to get a little bit of a break is normally a smoking shed. So it's got a bit of a conflict with well-being when you think about that. But can you create some sort of space for people to actually break from work? Can you start to think about how you can promote well-being within that space? So having a fridge so that people can bring their lunch in if they want to, having some books and magazines that people can share and just be able to have that switch off is really important. And if you have members of your team that might have relatives that do, I don't know, it could be yoga or it could be massage or anything that they can share and bring their passions and their interest into the workplace would make a big difference. I mentioned peer-to-peer recognition, and this is really an idea that came from a company in Sweden who decided to introduce something that they called the Order of the Elephant. Now, I've had many discussions with people about how you can use this in the care environment, but the key part of it is what this company did was they bought a big stuffed cuddly elephant, and the elephant was to be given from one employee to another to recognise something great that they've done in the workplace. And the really important thing was that it didn't come from management, it came peer to peer, and that was the recognition. And what they found it sparked was that when somebody had the elephant, other people would say, "Oh, you've got the elephant. What did you do to get the elephant?" And they would have to then tell the story of the great thing that they did. So it encouraged storytelling, it encouraged sharing positivity, and it really helped create a culture of well done, thank you, tell me this great thing that you did. I've talked to care companies about whether you could do this as a badge or a crown or a sash or something like that. But how can you encourage more peer-to-peer recognition? And that will really, really help build a more positive company culture. And the final thing that I'm going to say, and this is always controversial, is if you're using WhatsApp at the moment for your staff, and maybe you have a WhatsApp group for the team, that's great. And well done for organising that and having that communication. But I would really encourage you to replace WhatsApp with a free platform called Slack. Slack works the same way as WhatsApp does, but it's specifically for work use. And one thing that I see, and anyone who's watching now and is in a WhatsApp group for your work, how often do you look at that WhatsApp group when you're not working? And how often do you see a WhatsApp come through on that group and you start to get into work mode, your stress levels start to rise, even when you're out having a day with your kids or you're sat watching TV in the evening? And actually, it's affecting your well-being because you're being dragged into a work zone when really this is your time off. So how Slack works is it's a separate app that people can keep on their phone. They can set do not disturb times, so they can set it so that, you know, it's not going to notify them when they're not at work. And it also allows you to have different topics, which somebody who I told this to last year has set it up with his team. He's got a very small number of residents, and he said he actually has a little thread for each resident so that they can share photos, share information about what that resident's been up to for the next person who takes on that shift. And it's just really, really helped keep work separate from WhatsApp, which tends to be personal. So before I run out of time, just a few more ideas. Somebody mentioned about how to get staff to attend meetings, and I think that came in one of the early comments, and I think that that's something that's going to be difficult at the moment. Where is the incentive for people to attend meetings right now? They don't need to be face-to-face a lot of the time, although there is benefit to having face-to-face meetings. Can you do things such as walking meetings to try and get people away from Zoom, get away from that Zoom fatigue? Doesn't always need to be on video, and that doesn't mean people need to be together. But if you said we're going to have a team meeting at 4 o'clock, everyone grab your phone, grab your headphones, go for a walk, and we'll walk and chat. Then that can be a really good way of kind of encouraging a bit of well-being as well, because it's a bit of a, fresh air. Can you do things like sending out a 1-minute questionnaire every week? This can be via email, or it can be by a quick piece of paper to temperature check on well-being of your team. You really want to be keeping an eye on this right now, because what we are seeing with our clients at Judgment Index, and they use our assessment for recruitment, for development, but also it looks at a lot of things like stress levels within the team, and we are seeing a lot of burnout in the staff right now. You want to be keeping an eye on that, because the more informed you are, the better you're going to be able to manage it. And some other ideas there which I've shared already. So final thing from me, and obviously we'll see if there's any questions, but I will provide a free wellbeing policy template, as I mentioned. And if you want to hear more of those wellbeing tips, because I think I've got about an hour's podcast on it, then you can find that on the Road to Outstanding, which is on Apple Podcasts, it's on Spotify, anywhere where you get your podcasts. So thank you. I think I squeezed all of that in, Stu. It's funny because when you talk at conferences, you often speak for about 45 minutes, and I think you get very conditioned for speaking for that length of time.
Absolutely. Did very well there. Beautiful timing. Has anybody got any questions specifically for Sophie? Oh, that's great advice and hints and tips there.
Oh, I like somebody's mentioned about Slack, and it's changed their whole way of working, and reduced emails as well, which is really key. Yeah, give it a go, download it. It's a free app. I really do recommend, if you've got a team, use Slack to communicate with them.
Brilliant. Okay. There's no other questions. Just share my screen. Right, as it doesn't just tell me slideshow. Okay.
Perfect, we can see that, so I'll mute
Great.
myself now.
Thank you. So that's great. So we've heard from Helen in terms of the HR fundamentals, and obviously Sophie's been going through the wellbeing. And what I'm really going to go through is how you attract, recruit and retain great staff. And I think for me, the one thing that has come out of COVID is that it has really highlighted how professional and how highly trained care workers are in the UK. And I think that's something to really shout about, and it's something to promote within your business, that it's such a great business to be in, and there are so many opportunities out there. So as I say, I think it's trying to maximize that potential now as to how you can do that. So that's what I'm going to go through. And I'm just going to mirror what Sophie said. You need to start with values. We discussed last week on the, not last week, the week before on risk management, it's a top-down approach. You have to start with your mission, your vision and your values. And as Sophie quite rightly said, it's really how do you actually embed those values within your business? And that's absolutely key. So it's thinking, well, what would tell you that your values are being embedded? So what does your appraisal process look like? How can you actually get the feedback when on your one-to-ones and your supervisions? How are those people actually demonstrating the values for your business? Because that will tell you, those markers will tell you that those values are being embedded. And it also, when you have to have those conversations with people that I'm going to go through later, but you have to have those critical conversations, you can always refer back to your values, and that makes it a much easier conversation. So start with the values. People align with your values. So once you've got your values set in stone, people will align to them. It's making sure you live and breathe them every day. So in the business strategy, I actually came up, you know, I went through the magic formula for clients, but believe it or not, there is actually a magic formula for care workers too. It's just being very conscious about what that process is. So the first step is really think about, and I know Helen alluded to this, is really think about who you're trying to attract. What does your core workforce look like? And you'll find that not one size fits all. There is plenty, there is a number of care workers, a number of maybe 3 or 4 types of care workers that are in your business. And those are the people that you want to attract, and trying to build those avatars of the care workers that you need within your business. So it's things like weekend workers and shift workers. People want to work weekends. And I guess a lot of, you know, people who say, well, I can't get people to work weekends, that's because they've not built their avatar and they haven't targeted in the areas that they need to in order to attract those weekend workers. So it's really thinking about, well, okay, well, what does a weekend worker, what do they want to do? Where are they? Where do they shop? What do they look like? How old are they? Where do they go shopping? It's all of those things that will enable you to target that type of avatar for care workers. You then need to package it up and make it look attractive to them. And this is, they'll go into this in more detail in a moment, but it's absolutely key to do that. You know, you are promoting yourself. You know, I get some clients turn around to me and say, well, they should want to work. Well, no, you know, you've got to try and put yourself out there and make yourself attractive. You know, at the moment, that okay, there is going to be lots of redundancies, and unfortunately within other sectors, but you still, there's lots of other work there in different sectors, so you've still got to make your sector stand out. And why would they want to work in care? And then finally, it's thinking about, well, how are you going to promote that? How are you going to get your message out there? So that's the magic formula. Now, I've used Maslow's hierarchy of needs since I started working as a business consultant back in financial services. And Maslow's hierarchy of needs is the one central thing that you can do to attract employees, as long as you have built your service or built your recruitment process around it. And that's the key message here. So how do you use that for care workers? And most people actually want, microphone going off now. Most people want to have self-actualization. You know, they want to feel like they're achieving something. So want every employee to love coming to work every day. They strive to be an employer of choice, and want every employee to not only feel empowered but cared for too, because those are the things that care workers are after. Self-esteem, providing career pathways for all employees, enabling them to thrive in whatever capacity they choose. And again, this isn't just about, I know some companies will say that they just want them to have, they want a professional qualification. They want all their employees to get a professional qualification. However, if you are employing older workforce, people who just are not aspiring to that before, that's not going to increase their self-esteem at all. That is actually going to hinder them and make them feel a lot worse. So what do they want? Well, you know, how are they going to improve their self-esteem? It might be that they just want to do the job that they do, and that's absolutely fine. But they also might want to do things like specialise in areas such as dementia or end-of-life support. So really tailor what your care workers and what they actually want to achieve to map this process. Also, you know, people when they work in care, they tend to want to be part of a family. And what does that family look like, and how are you going to attract them to you? So it's what does it feel like, and how do you actually market that within your recruitment process? And also at the end is the safety and physiological support. Now, a lot of people talk about self-actualization and self-esteem, love and belonging, but there's a lot of people out there that just need a salary at the end of the working month, and that is their basic need, and they need that. So it doesn't matter about too much about the other bits, that's what they need. But again, once you've gone through, you've done your care worker segmentation, if you like, and created those avatars, you'll be able to pick out those bits for the specific ones tailored for your recruitment process. So again, looking at professional carer journey, and this is something that I did with Home Instead, and it worked really well. But it's really thinking about, well, what's in the mind of the care worker when they actually, if they've never done care before, and they think, oh my God, can I really do this job? Can I deliver personal care? Do I want to bath people? All of those things that are thinking, oh, I'm not sure I want to do that. So that's, why should they work for you? And it's thinking about, well, what does your website say that will make them think that you're a great business? What's the language that you're using? So it's things like, people refer to them as carers, but for me, what are they actually? And carer, being a carer can sometimes have a real, it doesn't ring any bells in people's heads, and that's not something aspirational. But if you changed it to, we have independent specialist roles. So we have people who are enabling people to be independent within their own homes, or, enabling people to be independent within our homes. And those are the sorts of things that language is really, really key to put into the process. Also about what does the process feel like? What does it feel nice when I phone somebody up? Am I going to get a good response? Am I going to get a professional person at the end of it who's going to take my inquiries? Think about, well, how does it feel if somebody phones up your organisation and responds to a care inquiry, a recruitment ad? What's the experience going to feel like? Then moving on to, what is the first day? Will I feel out of my depth, and what will the experience be like? And again, they'll be full of trepidation, especially if they haven't done care before. What is that first day going to feel like? So how can you put something on there that would actually really make it clear that it would be okay? They're going to feel okay on that day. Then looking at the training, will they feel supported? Will they be able to ask questions? It's going to be non-judgmental. Everybody's in the same boat. So again, thinking about that language. I know Sophie talks about rewards and recognition, and absolutely that's key, and that should be part of your promotional journey of the carer role. And how are you going to be rewarded? And again, if you go above and beyond, and always, and I know Helen mentioned it too, is receiving a thank you card is probably more valuable than anything else. So a handwritten thank you card being sent out by the business owner or their line manager really goes a long way. But there's lots of other things that you can do there. Then it's the career progression. How do I progress within the career, and what options are available out there? So how do you put that within your recruitment process? And then right at the end is, what happens when they leave? Will it be positive? And I know certainly from experience is that people, if they've done a good job and they leave on the, because they got a job elsewhere, well, what's the process for if they want to come back? Do you keep them informed? Do you keep in touch with them? Do you still contact them with job updates, or just say, how are you? Do you have a recruitment process that covers that? So that's the professional carer journey. And I know Sophie again alluded to this, is create professional carer stories. And humans actually, storytelling is innate. That's how we've learned through the generations, the hundreds of thousands of years that we've evolved. We have learned through telling stories. So we engage with stories. The more you can create those professional carer stories and put those on your websites, and again, going back to your avatars, what would that look like? What great stories can you tell about your carers that would give them, well, yeah, I want to do that job. That sounds like a business that I want to be part of. So where do you find these lovely people? And you know, that there are a number of strands. If anybody hasn't read Saving Social Care by Neil Eastwood, I would definitely recommend a copy of that. You know, he talks much about values-based, but also about where to find those care workers as well. So if you look at, first of all, is community networking. So what you're doing is you're actually targeting people who don't necessarily think they want to work in care. So you've got these, you know, people, these recruitment, like Indeed, for example, which I'll come on to social media, but the community networking really does reap so many more rewards if you get it right. And this is about having somebody within your local community who goes to social clubs, who really understands where the links are within the communities and the communities network. So it's church groups, it's things like charities. I know that there's been a lot of success within animal charities. So volunteers, if they're doing voluntary work, they potentially could work as a carer for you, so they get paid for it. So you're promoting that. So there's lots thinking about who your target audience is and your target communities. Then looking at social media, and certainly what we found was, although Indeed you can get a lot of bums on seats, as we would say, the retention rate from something like Indeed is very, very poor compared to Facebook. Facebook, the retention rate was significantly higher. It was the highest of all the retention rates through Facebook. So again, is thinking about, okay, well, how do you promote your business on Facebook? And it's going back to your avatars, going back to your professional care stories, professional care worker stories, and putting those stories on Facebook and promoting them. It's really easy to boost Facebook posts as well, so you can put your specific target within Facebook and it will go through to those specific communities and postcodes that you want it to. Also, refer a friend is that, again, it's to have that, you're incentivizing if they refer somebody to you as a care worker. Now, we've had mixed response with those, and sometimes they, well, we just don't get any. And if you're not getting any referrers from your existing care workers, ask them why, because there's nearly always a reason why people aren't referring. You know, one of them, well, you know, I haven't got enough hours as it is, so I don't want more hours. I don't want somebody else taking my hours. So you can allay those fears, and you can put that to bed if you just know what the problem is in the first place. And then also, again, it's been successful is thinking about targeted leaflet drops. And, you know, what has worked in the past is that those care workers actually deliver the leaflet drops, and you can put a code on there or a number, or even if they deliver them within a specific, they have specific postcodes where they deliver them to, or different roads, and they say, where do you live? You can then reward them for that. So it's thinking about those targeted leaflet drops. And again, when you're designing the leaflets, make sure that you're telling the stories and you've aligned the care professional, the avatars to those leaflet drops, having a few scenarios on there. So let's have a look at process. So you have to have a process, you have to monitor it. And certainly something that we found was when we looked at, you know, there was supposed to be a recruitment problem, but what we actually found was that there was a process problem. And there was plenty of care worker inquiries coming through, but they weren't being converted. And the reason why they weren't being converted was because they didn't have a specific process that was monitored, managed, with people accountable to. So first of all, you've got to think about what your target audience, what's your target for your care staff? And it could be anything, but take, for example, if you want to have 2 net professional carers per month, you then need to work backwards from there. So think about, okay, well, if you need nets, how many do you need gross? So this is how many you need gross. Okay, well, how many interviews do I need to get those gross? That's how many that you need to enter. And then prior to that is how many inquiries do you need? And those are the things, so you have to work backwards from what your ultimate aim is. Then look at who is accountable for it. And this is key, because again, if you have somebody who is just focused on all they do on a Tuesday, is phone people to get people in for interviews on a Tuesday afternoon. That's when they make all the phone calls. Lo and behold, they're not going to reach most of the people that have inquired because they work. They're not going to answer the phone. So how else can you actually make that work for people? And that's through sending text messages. And again, things like Slack would work with that. I think you can record information on that. So you can monitor what you've done and whether you've sent a text or not. So make sure that that it's appropriate. The accountability process is there, and also, what's that feeling going to be like? I'll come down onto that. So how will you measure it? So how will you measure it? Do you have your key performance indicators in place, and are you monitoring that are you challenging the recruiter who is actually going through this process and say, well, why haven't you completed this? Why haven't we got net care workers this month? And then thinking about, okay, well, what has been the problem? And you've got to manage that as a business owner. You have to manage that overall process and be accountable for it as well. And then finally is, how does it feel? So if the person feels that you've got time for them and you listen, and also we talked about don't have application forms on your website, make sure that you have the facility that people can just phone and have a chat. That's what they want. They want to feel reassured that what you do, they can always complete the application form when they come in for an interview. So don't make them complete an application form online, just have a chat with them first. So that's the process. So how to retain, and really again, we've already covered it, really is about having a career pathway for all employees and making it suitable for each one of those avatars. Thinking of absolutely essential, and I know Sophie covered it, is provide them with the opportunity to give feedback. And this can be confidential feedback. Make sure that they do have the opportunity to give confidential feedback. And more importantly, listen, because listening and acting on that feedback is central to the success, because if they feel that they're being listened to, it's going to have a massive impact on how engaged they are. And then obviously they implement the well-being that Sophie has covered. But, as Sophie said, they've gone through such a tough time at the moment, and just having that check-in with them and just listening to their concerns, listening, how are they feeling at the moment, that will go a long way to make sure that they are retained and engaged. Now, I mentioned this last week, and not last week, the week before, and I'm going to mention it again, and I know Helen, again, she covered it, but we have to be very comfortable with having the courageous conversations. And the wise, the foolish, and the evil. Actually, I had the pleasure of listening to Dr. Henry Cloud speak, and this is actually from a book called Necessary Endings. And if anybody wants to listen to that, I've actually got an extract that I can send you, the Necessary Endings, this particular extract of the chapter. And this is vitally important to make sure, as Helen said, you nip this in the bud. You have to be very, very focused on making sure that if there's any dissatisfaction in your team, that it's dealt with and really sorted out for good. And if you've got the wise people, the wise person is the person who says that if you say something that, okay, I'm afraid you've been doing this, and it's got to stop, then the wise person will say, yeah, sorry, really sorry about that, didn't know I was doing that. The foolish person is the one who, they keep doing it time and time again. You keep having the same conversation, and you've got to stop having that conversation. You've got to say, no, we're not having that conversation anymore, and put consequences in place if they don't do that. And then this is the third one, is the evil person, and we get this all the time. They are completely destructive to any organization, and I've seen it time and time again, where they cause so much disruption, they cause such amount of heartache for everybody involved, and if you don't action it quickly, it causes a lot of a ripple effect across the staff as well. So it's really important that if an evil person is in there, you get them out. You get them out as quickly as possible, and you deal with it. And that goes, again, you linking back to your values. Those are the values. If they're not adhering to the values, then you need to take action with it. So that is me. If anybody has any questions, I did that quickly then.
We do have a few questions that have come through.
Okay.
So, but if anybody's got any more, please do pop them in the chat. So somebody's asked about, do you think that there is a best job board for looking for office staff, specifically for office staff, or where is the best place to find office staff?
Job boards for office staff. I would do community networking. I wouldn't go to the job boards. I would look on Facebook. You know, especially thinking about the roles that you've got. I mean, people are crying out for work now. There shouldn't be a problem with it. So think about Facebook ads and thinking about the community networking. You know, if you go out and you have I mean, I don't know what the role is. I mean, I know scheduling is a particularly difficult job to do. And it's only a certain type of person that can do that job, you know, and that's hard to fill. But it really depends on what the role is. But definitely Facebook and community networking for me, not job boards.
I think even go on, Helen.
So another thing that I would say that one of the things that we've tried is items for sale. You can put your job board, your jobs on items for sale, and that becomes popular, which is in accordance with Facebook, and therefore it gets around the surrounding villages, areas, towns that you want it. So items for sale is really a good one as well.
And I would say even putting out, if you're looking for something like an office administrator, writing essentially a text message worth of information and sending it to all of your staff, that they could easily just forward that message to somebody they know that might be looking for a job. You never know.
Yeah.
Another question has just come in, Sue. I don't know if you've seen it. Helen, it might be useful for you as well. Is there any easy way we could benchmark our pay rates in the market? Julie's asked.
That is a difficult question, but an easy answer. Pay rates are different depending upon the location. You have to look at your surrounding competitors and what they're paying. And also one of the things you have to put your benchmarking on is about what kind of level these people are working at as well. So I would be looking at your competitors, and I would also be looking about what's out there in the market and what other people are doing. Majority of the pay that I see and I advise on now, looking at benchmarking, is above the minimum wage. It's around, depends for a care assistant, in order to attract and retain, you are looking over £9, £9.50 per hour.
And it's also to bear in mind, just to add, that some people put that high rate on, but actually when you phone up, they've included, they shouldn't do, but they have included holiday pay in with that. So it's always good to check.
Holiday pay is something that you shouldn't be including.
No, they shouldn't, but they do. I know I've come across it.
Yeah, and what I would be saying is actually, if those are the kind of people, then actually they could be technically, which they are, is breaking the employment law.
Yeah.
The other things that I do see a lot at the moment is travel time. Done a massive piece of work with somebody, one of my areas, and looking at travel times, making sure that the travel time pay is above the national minimum wage. So it's a big piece of work, but actually one of the things that I would be saying is making sure that your care staff are paid above the national minimum wage, especially if they're in dom care and they do travelling. And if anybody wants some help with that, then let us know.
Yeah, I think that's really useful. I think it's about transparency, isn't it, as well? How annoying is it for you if you inquire about something that's a price and then it turns out, oh, that's not the real price? Yeah. So just it's thinking about how that's going to make you come across to the people that are applying for jobs with you.
Yeah, and it's so important to create that good impression, because people tell stories. So if you get, they will go around and tell people that story. So you don't want that going out in the main, do you? You don't want that to be found out about you. You want only people to tell positive stories about who you are and what you do.
We do have another question. I don't know if there's any more, because there's still, I know we're getting close to the time that we're supposed to finish, but there's still people on the call. So if anybody does have any questions, please throw them in the chat. But somebody, Ollie mentioned that he'd only found out about these webinars very recently. So will there be recordings of the other webinars available?
I can send him a recording. That's no problem at all. I'll put it on this email. I'll say if anybody wants any links to the recording. It's actually on the same. It's on my YouTube channel, so they can work on that.
Okay, so people can head to your YouTube channel.
And I'll send them the link to it after this. I'll record it. It takes it ages, so it might be tomorrow.
Yes.
But, to download it, but yes, I will.
And then I think we mentioned that we will do, after this series has finished, we will send an email out with the links to every single one of the recordings and all of the details as well, so people can get it all in sort of one bundle. Yeah, I know I referenced one of the earlier talks, so I think if people have missed one or two of them, then you might want to go back and catch up, because they do cover such a good variety.
Yeah, and it's thinking, you know, if anybody has any ideas of subjects they would want us to cover in the future, then this is something that we're quite happy to do. It seems that there is an appetite for it out there, you know, very happy to share what we know. So if there is anything else that people want some advice on, then please do let us know.
Yeah, I was thinking from some of the comments early on, because I do a talk about staff induction where I talk about steps to perfect staff induction, and I thought, oh, I could have done that.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, absolutely, and it's critical. It is.
Anything else from anyone?
I think so. I think that's perfect timing.
We did it.
Well, if anybody hasn't got any other questions, then as I say, I will be sending the recording to everybody along with some of the resources. There was the link that you said, and I'll send the Wise, the Foolish and the Evil as well. So it's been lovely to have you all on the call, and thank you very much for listening.
Thanks very much for joining us.
Thank you. Take care. Bye.